Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Gittin Daf Chav Ches. We're going to begin as we were cut off short in the middle of Chav Zayin Amud Beis with the words of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi Omer, Kigon de Ka'amar, if you have the witnesses that say Nekev Yesh Bo B'tzad Os Plonis, that they are able to testify with absolute certainty, even though this get was lost, but they know for sure this has to be the get because there was a particular hole above the letter of one of the letters of the get. And this is actually very common practice, as I mentioned in yesterday's daf, that as I was engaged in Gittin for many, many years, so as an aide, if we ever had to step out of the room, after the first line was written, the sofer would put a hole on the top of above one of the letters, and this way that was a siman muvhak, and that's for sure acceptable. The havile siman muvhak. However, davka besad os plonis, the havile siman muvhak. You have to be able to actually identify where the hole is above a particular letter. Avol nekev ba'alma. If you just say, yeah, there's a hole in a get, because again, it's just something which is so commonplace that we do this. Lo. Now, it is a siman because not every get has any holes in it. Many of them don't have any. However, that's only considered to be on the level of a siman. And there's a machlokis, as is discussed, as we saw this Rashi actually in yesterday's daf as well, that when it comes to dinim of Isser, we are going to say when it comes to din d'Rabbanan, we're not going to be lenient when it comes to dinim of Eishes Ish, when it comes to this shita, if simanim or d'Rabbanan. If simanim or d'Oraisa, that's one thing. But if simanim or d'Rabbanan, that's already problematic. Now Rashi does point out that when it comes to dinim mominus, there's a concept of hefker based on hefker. So even if you hold that simanim or d'Rabbanan, we could still be samech on that. Back in the Gemara, Rabbi Bar Chana irches legita be'mid Rasha. So he had a get in which was lost, and Rashi says he was actually a shliach. They said, is simana isli begava? Is there some type of sign? Is there a simon on it? Then they add something else. Tvios eina is li begave. Do you have any tvios ayin? What does that mean? So Rashi says, Tvios eina begave shenosati einai bo. I put my eyes on it. Ad shani makiru yafe, that I recognize it. Blushum siman. So when it comes, interestingly enough, even if there's no siman, tvios ayin, if you really looked into it very deeply, so that is also acceptable apparently. Then isle begava. Ahadrua nihile, so therefore it was returned. Somewhere Loyadana imishum simana ahadrua. I'm not sure the reason why he got it back was because he identified an actual siman, and therefore that's a raya that he holds v'ksami siman of deraisa imishum tabias eina, or maybe because of his he saw something. Rabbi Davka subam min rabbanon, only a young Talmid Chacham. The Rashi says the yad b'tvias eina v'mishani b'dibure. So first of all, he looks into matters like someone who is engaged, for example, learning a lot of Gemara. You're always involved in tvias ayin. You look at the world in a different way. But Rashi also says, and they're not going to be mishana b'dibure. You know that they're a higher level of trust. Low. This is not something which we rely on other people. So let's look at question 14. Get she'amad ha'im machzirno so b'samanim do b'tvias ayin. This is also question TB26. So if it's a siman muvhak, like there's a particular hole above a certain letter, then certainly machzirno will return it. If it's a siman shena muvhak, then it's totally on the machlokus whether simanim or deraisa or rabbanan, and tvias ayin machzirin only if we're dealing with a surban or rabbanan. Okay, let's continue now with the next piece of Gemara. Imlav posel. So we said in the Mishnah that if the shliach loses the get and finds it will alter immediately, then it's fine. However, if let's say time has elapsed, so then in that situation we say it's not given back. The question is, as we asked yesterday, what does it mean to alter? So talking about Ezehu Shalol alter. What does that mean that it was not found immediately afterwards? That the din is that you can't give it back. So Amnas and Omer, numerous answers. Shishad Kadei Shetavor Shayara V'Tishra. It's a long enough time that another caravan could have come and basically set up camp. So therefore, it's possible. The whole issue again, it could be someone else's get. Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer Kadesha Hey Adam Oimed. The person is standing Baroa and he sees Shul Over Sham Adam, that no one else passed by. Which we often hold like the Yeshomrim. Pardon me. Shalosh Shaha Adam Sham. That no one basically lingered in that area. There was no people just walking around and lingering. Rabbi Omer Kadei Lichtov. That's a get, enough time to write a new get. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Kadei Likroso, enough time to read it. Achem Omer Kadei Likoisel Likrosoi. So it's interesting. This is Acherem Oimrim. There's a Yesh Oimrim, and that was an Acherem Oimrim. Kadei Likoisel Likrosoi. Enough time to write it and read it. Now says the Gemara, Befil Shaha, and even with a delay, the Yeshbo Simanim Me'idin Alav, and there were Simanim that you could testify upon that. So the Amri Nekev Yeshbo B'Tzad Ois Poini, that they could actually even say that there was a Nekev B'Tzad Ois Poini. Okay. Says Rashi, so even if there's a Siman Muvhok, Ve'ein Me'idin Al Simani Haguf, but they could not testify on the Simanim of the Guf. Says Rashi, shall get, the Guf of the get. And Rashi is going to quote basically the Gemara, could go in Aruch or Gutz. It's a longer, it's not as long. There's so many documents that look like that doesn't count. It has to be that whenever you're me'idin, it has to be in a situation that you have a siman muvhak for sure. However, if it's something in which is so common, that's nothing. Back in the Gemara, the Amri Orech v'Gutz. Matsu kosher b'kis ba'arniki b'tabas. Let's say you find this document and it's tied in some type of purse with a ring. Rashi says umakras akisvis arniki. You recognize it. You know that this is unique and special. So even though the get itself is not unique, however, it's surrounded, which is what our Mishnah talked about as we continue to Chav Chesam and Aleph. Oshamatsu ben Kalev. Let's say you found it, Rashi's beves in your house among kalim. If it was man meruba kosher, even after a long time, because again it's something which is unusual and therefore that's good enough. Itmar, we want like this. Rabbi Yehuda Mishmo halacha. What's the halacha? Shaloshaha adam sham. So we said that the halacha is, again, as we often quote the Yeshomrim, enough time that there was no one actually like lingering over there, and if that time has elapsed, that's no longer will alter, and therefore not going to be machzirin. Rabba bar Chana Omer Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel halacha, the halacha is shul over adam sham, that no person ever passed there. So lema mar halacha kamar halacha kamar. I want you to just say the names of the people you're haskening like. And it says mishum the afchilahu, because they can easily get confused. You may end up saying he holds like this and he holds like that. Okay. So we said if it was found similar to what we just quoted in a kli, and there you can recognize that your makar, this kli, is unique, so then we give it back. So my chvitza, so what exactly is this vessel or of sorts? Amaraba bavarchana chemas katana. It's a type of a kli. Rashi says hishal or. It's made out of leather. Umay teluskama telika detsabi. It's some type of a box only for elders. But again, there's specific type of kalim that were utilized, which therefore then itself would be enough of a siman, even if the document itself inside is not so distinguished. Now let's continue with the Mishnah where I would have liked to have started today's daf. Masnisan. Hamevi get, the person brings a get. And he leaves the husband who happens to be at the time an old guy. He's sick, he's old. So while he's traveling, let's say for the next month to get to this man's wife, to give this get, should we assume that he's still alive? So Rashi says, yes, we follow the status quo, and therefore, since the guy's alive, we're not going to assume that he died in the interim. Because, of course, if he did die, then it's not a get anymore. Of course, she's not married to him, but there could be yibum issues. There could be issues of, again, the nafkamina would be, again, if she was able to marry a Kohen. So Bas Yisrael Hanasul Kohen. Let's say you have a Bas Yisrael who is married to a Kohen, which means while she's married, she can eat truma. And her husband went to China on a vacation, or business, right? She doesn't have to assume that the second her husband leaves, that he's dead. And especially, of course, we're talking about where she has no contact of him. We can still assume that he's alive. Again, this concept, we're going to be Hemid Davar Cheskaso, and we just assume he's still alive. If a person brings a karban chatas, in which we know you have to be alive for a karban chatas to be brought, so the question is, can the shliach rely again if this person's alive? So again, the karban can be brought, and Rashi says, we don't have the concern that maybe the owner of the karban chatas died in the interim, and therefore, again, l'misa also, you're not allowed to bring this karban anymore. We're not concerned about that. Says the Gemara, Omer Rabba, Lo shanu el zakin shel hegil gvurais v'chayle. We're only talking about the fact that we can rely that the guy's still alive if he hasn't reached the age of gavuros, which it's brought down in Tehillim actually, that it says shmoinim shana lishna dekra. Right, that's the language of the pasuk. That a person lives 70 years, if he's strong, 80 years. And sick. So if he's not sick, says Rashi, O choila, there must be davka choila v'lo goises, sick and not like dying. Shrov choila mechayim. So if again he's not even he's sick, but he's only 50 years old, you're not going to be soymech on the fact that he's going to be dead by the time a month comes about. He's probably going to live. If you have an old person, he is already 80 years old. The guy says, or you have this guy who's dying, who may not necessarily be 80 years old, but he is on his deathbed. Shirav Gais Lamisa Lo. So the only time we're going to say there's a cheskes kayim, that we assume that he's still alive, is where there's going statistically probability. Now, if the person is already 80 years old, and let's say the life expectancy, as it says in Tehillim, is 80 years old, so we know that he's going to die this year, or he's going to die soon, or he could die in a few years or a couple of weeks. So because of that, he no longer has this chazakah due to his age, or if he's extremely sick, in which he will most likely die from this sickness. In that situation, we're not going to be soymech on this get. So the question is, how does he bring a get? Probably the answer is he would have to bring it himself, and not through a shliach. Eisve bayis. We ask 1 second. Hamevi get. If a person brings a get, v'nicha zakin, again similar to our Mishnah. However, if you've been mea shana, even if the husband's 100 years old, what's he doing again? Wanting to divorce his wife? It's not probably because he hates his wife at 100 years old. You'd hope it's probably because he's being compassionate, so he's not zokuk yavam, whatever. So noisalam b'cheskashu kayim. So the din is that we can assume he's still alive. What do you mean? I thought you said there's a chilk between 80 or under 80. So tiyofta, that actually is a refutation. Now the boy saying, well, you could actually answer it and reconcile this. Kivandi iflig iflig, unbelievable answer. Says Rashi, maybe we see this guy's different. This guy is a totally different human being. Why? Mishar derech kol haaretz sheherech yomim ad mea shana. Because we see that he's already lived so long, to 100 years old, says Rashi, if look, he's going to probably continue to live. Ve'enu kashar adam, he's not like a normal guy. Yos karb lomos, that he's close to death. Avo ben shmeinim va'achas, or yoser ad tishim karb lomosu. Someone who's 80, 81, all the way until he says 90, which is interesting. Rashi, 90, well, how about between 90 and 100? Okay, you have to understand what Rashi is getting at. The point basically is, if you see, according a normal person, so you say, okay, he's going to live until he's 80, and he's 80. But if you see this person has lived so long, he's already 100, it's like, you know what, we can't make any more assumptions about this guy. This guy is, who knows how long he's going to live. He may live many, many more years. Okay, so again, you have to really look at it as a case-by-case basis to assess that person, and like, not to assess his health, but to be able to assess the age. So not necessarily is it a person who is, again, well, a person who, the Metzias is, it's like this. The way that you have to read the Gemara is like this, because you don't want to make different shiurin. If you're 80 years old, so then at that point the din is that we can't be saimich, or we can't be relying on your chazaka. However, once you continue to live and now you're already 100, at that point we are going to be relying on your chazaka because you're already 100. Ramalei Abai Rabbi. So Abai posed a question to Rabbi. Tanan. Stira. Maybe get ben chazaka no chayla no islam b'chaska shu kayim. So our Mishnah said you can just assume the guy's alive. But elsewhere it says, a person says, I'm going to give you a get an hour before I die. So this way the get will be chal. So asur lechol truma miyad. Should not let you eat truma immediately. Now, why not? If in fact we put a person by his chazaka shehu kayim, so maybe this guy's 30 years old and he just makes the stipulation for his wife. How do you know that we're just going to assume that he's going to die, that now she can't eat truma anymore? So if that's the case, so we should say the same thing over here. We should never allow a shliach to bring a get, because we should always assume maybe he's going to die. So is there a way to distinguish truma from where apparently we are chai shlomisa and a get? So Amalei truma gittin karamis. You can't ask a contradiction between those two. Truma efsher, get lo efsher. So truma, says Rashi, you can survive. You don't have to eat truma food to survive. You could eat regular chulin food. However, get is lo efsher, says Rashi. We can't be concerned that he's going to die. If we're concerned, get we're basically going to say that there's no such thing as a shliach, because we're always going to be concerned maybe the guy's going to die the second the shliach turns around and starts delivering the get abroad. And then all of a sudden, if we've limited the possibility of a woman getting divorced, so we're going to increase agunos, which is the last thing we want to do. Again, we constantly see this throughout this Masechta, the great level of sensitivity the Chachamim have to try to do whatever they can to, when a divorce is happening, to make sure it happens quickly and without any stringencies. Rami Truma Truma. Okay, so we'll ask the steer in Truma itself, and this is a Gemara in Sukkah too. Tanan Bas Yisrael Hanasul Kohen. So you have a Bas Yisrael who marries a Kohen, which now she can eat Truma because she's married. B'Holach Balam Dinas Yam, which is mamish like our Mishnah. Ochelos b'Truma b'Chesed Shu Kaim. So that, because that is our Mishnah. Okay. Raminhu Harizeh Gitech Shoachas Kedem Lisasu Solecho b'Truma Miyad. So our Mishnah talks about the case of Truma, and we say by Truma she can keep eating Truma, but we see elsewhere she's not allowed to eat truma. So Rabbi Yitzchak Shani Hasam. It's different when he made that stipulation. Shari Asr Lav Shah Achas Kedem Misasai, because he did aser her 1 hour before his death. Says Rashi, Oma Chishin Lamisa. We don't really concern ourselves with death. Shani Hacha Shahari Asr Mechayim. He asered her while he was alive. Shah Achas Kedem Misasai. We don't know when that is, but 1 hour before he dies, it's going to be taking place. Kol shaita, and every moment, iklas fuke, there's a doubt, bahi shaita shasidli aser. Maybe that this is the time that she'll become aser. Now, you can also just say, Pashit, in this case, he's like already talking about Misa, right? So since he's talking about Misa, so it has to be Chayshel Misa. But that's the whole idea here, is that she's going to be asered for sure an hour before he dies. We don't know when that hour is. So therefore, because every moment is this element of a suffix that he put upon himself, on her, so we say, you know what, better you don't eat truma. My inspiration. How do you know that he's going to die first? Maybe she'll die first. This moment of him dying may never end up happening. So that's only going to happen if he dies before her, but she may die before him. So we're going to see, as we quote this so many times, even already in this Masechta, that there's a machlokes whether or not you're chayshel misa. So therefore, our Mishnah, which says she could eat truma, because we're not chayshel misa. The brayso that was quoted, where she has to stop eating truma immediately, is because we're chayshel misa. How do we see this? That none of you saw already a few blot ago. You bought wine among the kutim, and you don't have a kli to be able to be mafresh, and you want to eat right away. So one shita says, you can say shnei lugin sheni asal hafresh harahin truma. So I'm going to separate like 2%, but it's going to still be it's all together. But this big vat of wine, 2% of it is truma. So based on my dibur alone, it works. Sarah Meiser Rishon, 10% will go to Meiser Rishon, Tisha Meiser Sheni, and then because it's already separated the 10, so there's like 90 left or 88 left, it's a lot of dafka, so therefore 9 is separated. Rameir holds, and there's different girses, exactly, Gemara talks about, is it Zug Zug, so Div Rameir. We'll just say Rameir holds this. Rameir holds that you could do it. Why? Because he's not chayshel misa, right? He's not concerned, basically, that this barrel is going to break and die, right? So he's not concerned. He's not afraid of terrible catastrophes potentially happening, which will be like our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, Oysun, because they are chayshel misa, they're afraid of all these different things. Rabbi Omer, as we continue Chav Chasam Beis, another answer. Shema me soy chashina. The notion that the guy's going to die right now, okay, fine, we're not chayshel misa, and that's the reason why he can go and give a get. Shema yomos chayshina, maybe he will die later on in the future, soon, that we are chayish. Says Rashi, Avol zu shenais. Let's look at the whole Rashi. Dokmeinan shema meisal chashin. Dokmeinan a chazaka. We're going to put him on a chazaka. This guy, shehanichu chai. That since the shliach left while he was alive, that's fine. Also, the kohen who goes to another country, so his wife could keep eating truma. Kivan shel girsha, since she's not divorced, eno nesera selim kemes. She's allowed to eat truma as long as he's still alive. The case he says, here's the get 1 hour before my death. Shemel yomos miad. We're not concerned he's going to die that second. We're not going to say the chazak is so bad that it's just gone. But later on we're concerned. So our Mishnah goes on the chazaka that he's alive, and we assume he's still alive. But for the case of 1 hour before, we don't know the future. If he dies in an hour, she can't eat truma now, so that's the reason the chiluk. Okay. So that's how they make a distinction. When it comes to this barrel of wine that we just mentioned, they're talking about the possibility it's going to break now, right? It's going to die and get broken now. And they argue, when it comes to a noid, it's different because you can give it over to a shimer. You can hire someone to protect it. So there's a greater chance that it's not going to break. But you can't do that obviously for Misa. So Avrach Sarach. We say this often. The co-signer is going to need a co-signer, right? How do we know that the shomer is not going to make a mistake and maybe it'll still break? We're not concerned it's going to break right and die right now. Shema Yomos Tanaihi. Shema Yomos is actually a Machlokes Tanaim. Okay. Says Rashi, so Shema Meisal Chashina and Masnis Never Kol. Our mission is like everyone, which is why you could do all these things. You have a shliach. Ubraisa shahari zegitich tanahi. That's actually machlokas Rameir b'chaverav. Back in the Gemara. Hasholeich hatasoi. Okay, let's look at question 1. Heichen matzinu tanai de pligi ichashin l'shem yomos. Where do we see this? That they argue. So he says that by the case of shnei lugin shani yasel hafresh de pligi ichashin l'bikiyas anoid, which is the same thing as shem yomos. Okay. Says the Gemara. Hasholeich hataso midas yom. So you can bring a carbon chatas through Alidei Shleach, and we're not worried. We are going to assume that the guy's still alive and can bring the carbon. There's another problem. Carbon chatas requires that the owner has to place his hands on the carbon. So how is it shaykh to do so? And Rashi quotes, so maybe Shleach will do it. So he quotes the Tars Kahanim, Yadai v'lo yad b'nai, Yad v'lo yad shluchai. You have to do it. You can't have a shliach do that. So Amar Rav Yosef b'karban noshim. We're talking about the carbon of a woman. If let's say she was b'shoigeg regarding an iser kares, so on this the din is that she brings karbanos. However, as we saw in Gemara and Kedushin, the pasuk says daber b'nei Yisrael v'samach b'nei Yisrael samcha b'nei Yisrael samchais. Only men do smicha, but not women. Rav Papa Omer b'chatas oif. We can talk about the carbon chatas oif, which is a chatas, but it's a bird. We don't do smicha on birds. We only do it on behemoths. It was smicha. So we need to mention these 3 cases of our Mishnah. Then all those cases we have a chazaka that the person's alive. Diashmin and get regarding get mishum dol esher. As we said, it's not possible that we're going to say, okay, she'll live without it. That means she'll be an aguna. Over but truma de efsher emalo. When it comes to truma, she could survive without eating truma. She could just eat chulin. V'yashmi'in on truma the zimdul efsher. Sometimes, what if she's poor and she needs to rely on eating truma? That's all she can get her hands on. So that may also be a case of the efsher. Of a chatas ha'oif, when it comes to chatas ha'oif, misvekel leil chol nazar tzricha. There's a suffix over here. The notion of chol shenishcha to lazara is a huge problem. Not sure why it has to say chat. It has to say chatas of. Rashi's milos ha'oif miyutar, because it could be talking about nashim, so it could be a behema. So it's a lav davka of. But anyway, the point is that to bring a carbon into the azara, maybe that's not something we would do. Question 2. Is he able to send karbanos? So women could carbon not isha or a chatas of deleka smicha. Okay, let's get to let's see the next Mishnah. Says the Masnis. Shloish davarim Amir Rebbe Lezer ben Prata lefnei chachamim. There were 3 things that he said. V'kimu es davarim, and they accepted their words. Al ir shekifa kar koim. If you have a city which is surrounded by an army, Vial Hasfina ha miturafes bayam, and you have a boat that is not doing well in sea, it hasn't yet sunk. Vial hayaitze lidain, a person who is going to be judged, din nefashos, in which he's found guilty, he'll be sentenced to death. Shein becheskes kayamin. We'll still assume they're alive because there's been no verdict or anything like that. So there's no guarantees the person's boat's going to necessarily sink. Okay, we know it's turbulent waters, but there's no guarantee. Al-ir shekavsha karkaim. If you have a city in which is already captured and surrounded by ferocious enemies of an army, or svina sha'avr b'yam, you have a boat that's lost at sea, which is gone, it's sunk. A person is already sentenced to death and is literally walking out to be sentenced to death. We're going to take upon ourselves the stringencies of life and death. What does that mean? If she's a bas kohen and her husband's a kohen, if she's a bas Yisrael and her husband's a kohen, she can't eat truma anymore because we're going to assume he's dead. For that matter, a bas kohen who's married to Yisrael, even though it's true he's probably dying, he's about to die soon, we're not going to allow her to eat truma, even though the truth is, once she goes back to her father's house, she'll be able to eat truma again. Okay. Back in the Gemara. Rav Yosef, Lo Shanu El Bebeis Shal Yisrael. The only time we make this distinction, that says Rashi that we're going to say that maybe he's still alive, there's a chance that he's alive, is only if it's a Beis Din Shal Yisrael. The Beis Din Shal Yisrael Kiban de Gomer Le Dina Lakatala Mikut Katale. When it comes to them, forget it. As soon as he's been sentenced to death, he's going to be killed. Says Rashi, so even if after Gemar Din, it is possible that they could overturn the verdict. As the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Hasus Rotz Umamidoi, that a horse can run literally to stop the sentence. In other words, if he's seconds from being executed, but we find some schus, we will stop it moments before. So therefore, there's an element of suffix. However, when it comes to once the non-Jewish courts decide to sentence someone to death, that's it. But they also accept bribes, so maybe we should assume that possibly he can get out of it there too. When did they take bribes? Only mikame del lachtaim pursi shanmag. Only before they actually basically sign and seal the whole sentence, which is a language in Farsi of psak din, the Gemar din. However, lebasar de michsam porse shanmag lo shakli. They're not going to take bribes anymore because it's done. So in the midst of the court case, you're right. They could take bribes, but not afterwards. Meisve kol makam shamidu shnayim. Anytime, says Rashi, Reisha, Hachi Isa, Misha Nigmar Dinoi, a person that was already Gemar Din, he's been sentenced to death, Ubayach, and he runs away, this is the first parak in Makos, so, Meet Kol Mokum Shamdu Shnaim, if two people stand, V'yomru, Me'idam Anu Ish Ploini, Shnigmar Dino Bebeis Din Shal Ploini. I already know that this guy was sentenced to death, Uploini Beploini Edom, and this is these guys, there's witnesses, so Harizei Harik, he can be killed. Says Rashi, Alma loyrin and Shema Matzubos Chus Achrakein. In the Jewish court, we're not going to just assume that everything is okay. Marantus Dilma Bareach Shani. The fact that he ran away, it is different. So in that situation, we're going to have different laws because the guy ran away when he obviously wasn't supposed to. Tashma. Shama, let's say it was overheard based in Israel from a Jewish court, that they said each ploni mace, that such and such a person died, each ploni neherag, this person was killed, yasiu es ishto. So you can, based upon hearing that, you could marry his wife. Says Rashi, each ploni mace, but based in misas atzmo, could go in mishal laka v'shana, but based in kainzo iso kippah. There's sometimes that he's going to be put into a cell. So Yisos Ishtu, you can marry his wife based on that. Mikum risin shel avkachavim. However, when it comes to these courts, and you hear ish poini meis, ish poini nerag, al Yisuas Ishto. You cannot necessarily rely on that. So kumant risin, Rashi says, is mamunim leharig, the one who's like the executioner. So there you don't rely. So my mace, my nerag, what does that mean? Elam a mace mamish, that he died, ben nerag mamish, he was killed, to gavasi gavi kachavim. So we're going to compare it also to kachavim. So my al Yisuas Ishto. Why shouldn't you be able to marry the guy's wife? He's dead. Hakaimalon the whole meseach lefetuma hemunim himile. They're just talking in common stance. It's being meseach lefetumo, so they're probably not lying. They're just talking, so it must be true. So you should be able to marry. Elolav meis yotzi lomos. It means that he's about to be killed. Nerg yoitzel harig. V'katani b'beis Yisrael Yisuas Ishto. We see when it comes to Beis Yisrael you could marry. So we see when it comes to even Beis Yisrael, we're assuming that the guy's going to certainly be dead. L'olam meis mamish v'nereg mamish. So why, when it comes to Chachavim, not? But don't we believe him? That's only when it comes to, says Rashi, Lo Shanu, the Noisin of Chaimer Chaim, El Bedini of Chachavim, the Shaku Shuchada, of a Bemilsa, the Shaichi Ba, Avde, Laksakuki, Shikraihu. So in that situation, it is possible that there is lying. We're going to stop there. Question 3. You heard that the guy was, there's a Gemara din that he was going to be killed. Can you marry his wife? So, right? So according to one man de Armer, it's we're more lenient when it comes to, we're more likely to assume that he could still be alive by Beis Din Yisrael, because we will return his din over, or maybe it's the other way around, because the Beis Din Shel Akum maybe takes shaychad, takes bribes, and therefore that's more of a reason why we should be assuming regarding that. TA 26. Hasholech chatasa imivdin esayam makrivin oso b'cheska shukayim eich makrivin haboy smicha. So it's the exact same question as we saw. This is TA 26, and the answer is it's either a woman or we're talking about a chatas ha'oif. Question TB 27. Mishnah chayav chatas v'hu mivdin esayam. Yochel shul karbanu as karbanaisav, mamish, the same question as we said before. Again, the difference between the only time it certainly is allowed is if it's a chatas oath or if it's nashim. Adkan.